Vandaag heb ik de eer om in gesprek te gaan met een van de meest invloedrijke denkers op het gebied van productiviteit en mentale helderheid. David Allen. Hij is inmiddels 80 jaar en woont de laatste jaren samen met zijn vrouw in Amsterdam. Natuurlijk is hij bekend van het wereldwijde succesboek Getting Things Done, dat miljoenen mensen heeft geholpen om rust in hun hoofd te vinden, productiever te worden en helderheid te creëren in een drukke wereld. We praten vandaag over focus, stress, balans en hoe je mentaal ruimte maakt om te doen wat er echt toe doet. Een inspirerend gesprek over helder denken, moeiteloos leven en vooral doen wat werkt. Mr. David Allen, thank you for being here.
Michael, thank you for inviting me.
It's an honor, it's a pleasure. It's always nice to talk to wise men as I see you.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, I know. I have to tell you this story. You wrote Getting Things Done almost 25 years ago. We will go in depth about the book and why you wrote this book. But in that time, I was building a company here in Hilversum, where we are recording this podcast. We had over 150 employees. I was 29. It was a media, internet, TV company. You know, the internet was growing. Everything was new. Not many people were using email and computers and stuff like that. And my life was about work. I was working 90 hours a week. I was stressed. I was completely not organized. I had no idea what I was doing. And I should have read your book by then, which I didn't until about 10 years ago. I read the new version of 2015. And last week, I spoke to Mike. He's the CEO of our current company, Meditation Moments, our app. And I told him we would meet today. And he told me, wow, the David Allen, he really changed my life. He's 30 now. He's the CEO of our company. And he told me that book really changed my way of thinking, organizing, everything in life. And he is the most organized person I know. He is structured in everything, which I'm not. And he told me the success of Meditation Moments, the company, was because of reading your book. Wow. So you are part of my success.
It's funny, Michael, I never know really what sticks out there or what stuck with people. Yeah. So I just kind of move on to whatever's next. And I don't really follow up with everybody very well or much at all. And I'm always delighted to hear when stuff stuck, with somebody and that it made a big difference.
Do you have any idea how many books you sold?
About 3 million.
Worldwide,
in 30 languages. So it's you could have fooled me. That was not my plan. I just had to write the book just to get the stuff out of my head that I'd done for 20 years. Yeah. And I had no idea. I had, aspiration, but no expectation, whether anybody would buy it or not, whether it would be a bestseller. Mm-hmm. Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
So could have fooled me.
Before we dive in, can you first, for so many people, because there are maybe 3 or 5 or 10 million people you've influenced with your books and lectures and the programs, but there are so many people who have never heard of Getting Things Done, which could help them, because this podcast is for all the people who are stressed, having the feeling that they have too little time, too many things to do, no peace of mind. And your methodology really can change that, as which you've proven over the years. Can you, to start with, tell us about the fundamentals, the 5 steps?
Sure.
What is Getting Things Done about?
Well, there are 3 basic models that the book talks about. The most popular part of it is the most tactical and operational part of it, which is the 5 stages. The 5 stages of how you take a situation and get it under control and get more clarity and more room in your head. I didn't make them up. I just recognized them. That's what you do when you get the situation under control. Like if your kitchen's out of control, you're going to go through 5 steps. First of all, you notice what's off, what's not on cruise control. That's a capture step, capturing what has your attention. So step 1 is capture. Step 2 is then looking at what you captured. If that's all you did, you'd just be a list freak and you just have lists all over the place. What you need to do is essentially, once you've captured stuff, is then clarify what specifically those things mean to you and what you're going to do about it, if anything. That's the clarify step. Once you've done that, part of the clarification is a really powerful piece of this, because what it requires you to do is to decide, what does this mean? Is it an actionable item, yes or no? If no, it's either trash, reference, or on hold for a period of time. If it is actionable, then answering the question, well, what's the very, very next physical, visible action you would need to take, the next action? If you can actually take that action in 2 minutes or less, you should just do that no matter what the action is, if you're ever going to do it at all, because it would take you more time to organize it and look at it again if it's less than 2 minutes. I've had, by the way, sidebar, I've had a number of executives tell me that was worth everything they ever paid me, just the 2-minute rule. Teflon, in and out. So that's the clarify step, and also whether there's some outcome you're committed to finish about that you can't finish in the moment. That's a project. So clarifying next actions and projects, and then what's referenced and what's on hold or what's trash. That's the clarify step. And then that's essentially how you get your capture stuff zeroed out, because you need to clarify. You don't finish everything. You just go through that process. And if you can't finish it, but it's still something you need to be reminded about, it needs to go on some sort of an external brain or some sort of an external placeholder, so you can see it at the appropriate time. That's the organized step, step 3. So you've captured, you've clarified, then you organize the results of that. My actions I need to be reminded about doing, my projects I need to be making sure that we get it complete, etc. Then you need to make sure that once you've done all 3 of those steps, then you need to make sure you look at your inventory of your commitments, because that's what this does, is it inventories all your commitments. A lot of those are commitments with other people, but they're all with yourself. So you need to then evaluate that inventory. That's the step 4, reflect. I need to step back and take a look at all the errands I need to run, all the agendas I need to go over with my vice president, all the stuff I need to finish, etc. That's the review process, step 4. And then step 5 is then engaging your attention in your activity. Engage. So if you've done steps 1 through 4, then when you engage and decide to do something, it's from a trusted place, not a, I hope this is the right place. So those are the 5 steps: capture, clarify, organize, reflect, engage.
Yeah. It sounds so simple.
It is very simple, and it is very difficult for people to build that as a consistent habit.
And why is it so difficult?
People are addicted to their ambient anxiety.
How come?
I don't know. They grew up with it. It's like the last thing a fish notices is water. The last thing most people realize is how much, essentially, a kind of a stress. I used to say this handles overwhelm, but overwhelm handles itself usually. If this building catches on fire, you'd figure out something to do, and you'd engage with it appropriately. It's the ambient anxiety. It's that stuff that wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, God, I should have. Or, I need to remember, whatever. And that, because people live in that so consistently, nobody ever really knew they could get rid of that. Having an absolutely clear head. And that's, I think, why most people, they don't have a reference point about what it would like to be totally clear about all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I told you, I was building this business 25 years ago and working, day and night, 90 hours a week. I was stressed, had a lot of, shit going on in my private life, couldn't handle my daily life, couldn't handle my emotions, which is very important. I should have read your book by then, but I went into meditation. I started to meditate to clear my mind. I needed to clarify what was going on in my mental factory. And that changed my life. And when I was listening to your talks and what you've been through in life, there was a similarity, because what I learned in mindfulness and meditation has some overlaps with getting things done. Clear your mind.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's how I came up with it.
That was my question, because you said it was not your intention to write the book, but why did you?
Michael, it took me 20 years to figure out what I'd figured out, and that it was unique and nobody else seemed to have figured it out that way, and it was bulletproof because I'd had many thousands of hours actually working the material with, I got thrown into the corporate training world and did that mostly in the U.S., some outside the U.S. And a lot of my consulting, I had a small consulting practice, and my consulting turned more into, we didn't call it coaching back then, but it's kind of what it was. Mid to senior level people in these organizations would hear about me or what I was doing, or they would be in a seminar I'd conducted, and they said, David, can you come sit next to me in my office and help me implement what you talked about? Mm-hmm. So I spent literally thousands of hours doing that. But I got into this because of my own meditation practices. I dropped out of graduate school because it didn't seem like academia was anything that would turn me on. Now, I was in graduate school in American Intellectual History in Berkeley in 1968. Now, Berkeley in 1968 was kind of heady time and a heady place to be. And so I basically was tired of studying people who seemed to be enlightened and wanted to have my own. So I dropped out of school and went searching for myself, God, truth, and the universe. Meditation, spiritual practices, lots of experimentation with that, and then martial arts. So I got a black belt in karate in my 20s, and a lot of that, the very practical aspect of having a clear head is if 4 people jump you in a dark alley, you do not want to have 2,000 unprocessed emails somehow hanging around your psyche. You need to be clear, and then clear, and then clear. And that, because I found the practical value of clarity, and a lot of my martial arts training was to sit and meditate, actually just be quiet, still, focus on your breathing. Now the mindfulness people are teaching that these days as a way to come present because your breath is present. And so if you could just stay focused on that. And so that gave me the inspiration to keep my head clear. Then I started my own little consulting practice, and my life got busy and more complex, and it kind of screwed up my clear space. So I said, well, I just need this for myself. So I started experimenting with various things that people told me about or that they were using or whatever. And I didn't wake up one morning with this whole, epiphany. It was a long string of epiphanettes, as I say, a little piece here, a little piece there. And I started to, cobble all that together into my own system, and it worked. It was a way I could stay as my life was getting more complex. I found ways to keep clear. And I turned around, and a lot of my clients at the time were, much like you said, were stressed out and overwhelmed, had too many things going on, et cetera. And so I started to share my techniques with them. And if they applied it, it did exactly the same thing for them. More clarity, more control, more focus, more space in their head to be thinking about more meaningful stuff. So I went, wow, that's cool. So that became sort of the core of a lot of what I was consulting about. Again, we didn't call it coaching back then. It was mostly just consulting to small business owners and entrepreneurs, et cetera. And then somebody in the big corporate world saw what I was doing. He said, David, we need that result in our whole culture. Can you design some sort of a training around what you've come up with? So I said, I don't know, I'll see. So I designed a training. It turned out to be, we did a pilot program for 1,000 executives and managers at Lockheed. This is 1983, 84. And suddenly I found myself thrust into the corporate training world. Now, as a history major at graduate school in Berkeley in 68, if you'd told me I was going to be in the corporate training world, I'd have said, what are you smoking? Come on. Who are you kidding? So this was not any big master plan, but it turned out that was the ripest audience for what I'd come up with. This is the mid-'80s, the organizations were flattening. They were requiring a lot more accountability down the ranks, expecting people to sort of take control of their own area, and they didn't have the bandwidth to manage and handhold everybody. And so it was the ripest audience, and they were willing to pay me for my time and my model. So I said, well, gee, I guess that's what I'll keep doing. And as I said, and then it took me 20 years of that to figure out that somehow I'd figured out something that was unique. Nobody else seemed to have done it exactly the same way. And it was bulletproof. Nobody could punch a hole in it. Anybody who started to implement any of this model achieved some improvement in their condition.
Yeah.
So that's where, a lot of that first piece in the book, that's, again, so tactically, the 5 steps, But then there are 2 other models that are kind of sleeper, if you will. The model of the horizons of focus, the 6 horizons of commitments that people have, starting at the top, purpose and your core values. And then you have a more operational vision of what that would be like, successfully. And then you have objectives like goals, in the next year or 2, here's what I need to do to make my vision happen. And then you have accountabilities. People often miss that one, called what are the things you need to maintain so that you have a healthy engine and you are healthy in your business or in your life. And those are the areas of focus. So, for instance, an org chart in an organization would be areas of focus: executive, admin, operations, PR, customer service, et cetera. You don't finish those things. Those are just areas that people need to maintain a certain level of standards. And then you have all the projects you need to do about any of that. All the things that take more than one step to complete, you can finish within the next few weeks or months. And then you have all the action steps you need to take about all those moving parts. So I tried to get it as simple as I could make it. People say, how do I set priorities? I say, I couldn't get it any simpler than just recognizing these different levels of commitment we have. Obviously, the top one would be that you want to make sure you're on purpose. A lot of entrepreneurs don't even think about purpose. They just have a fire in their belly and they just get going and come on, join me, let's make this thing happen. They start to think about purpose if somebody who tries to buy them, or they want to buy somebody, right? Then they have to say, wait a minute, is this on purpose? And then they have to rethink, wait a minute, what's the purpose of my company? Why would I even want to do that? Because it's very easy not to say no. Very easy to just take on too many more things than you could possibly handle in your company and in your life.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a short version. The third part of it is what I call the natural planning model, which is how do I take a situation or a project and think it through most efficiently and effectively to get to the next actions that need to be taken about it. And so that's a model that I discovered. Anyway.
Logic.
Very logical.
Clear
and actually
thinking.
very, very simple.
Yeah.
Because the natural planning model is just like, well, what's the purpose of the project? Mm-hmm. And then, what's the ideal scene, the vision of it being highly successful? And then brainstorm, mind mapping or, what are all the potentially relevant things I need to consider in this project? And then organize, well, here's the sequence of things that need to happen, or here are the major components. And then next actions. What are the next things that need to happen on this project? That's a natural planning model. I figured that out simply because people were asking, David, how do I plan a project? And I had to scratch my head because I didn't have any good model. And I started asking all the people in training and HR and so forth around these corporations I was working with. I said, what's a good model? Do you have a good training about that? No, they didn't. So I said, okay, scratch my head. So then I thought, well, I call it the natural planning model because we actually all do that all the time. That's how you got dressed. That's how you...
You just do it.
You just do it, but you have a purpose. Get out of the room. Yeah. Right? What's your vision? Being out of the room safely. Yeah. Right? What are all the things you need to consider? Well, I don't want to run into that. Am I dressed okay? So you actually go through these. What I did, I don't know if it took me hours or days or weeks to sit there and think about, wait a minute, we plan all the time. Just most people are not that conscious of the stages that go through in your natural planning process. But once you actually identify those, you can then turn around and apply that in much more complex, sophisticated situations. And that's where the natural planning model has been highly successful for the people who've used it.
Yeah. But you have to bring it down to the basics. Keep it simple. And I think most people, they don't have focus. And there's so much going on in their minds, in their brain, and they're so mixed up, especially now, It's been 25 years later, after the first publication of Getting Things Done. The world has changed so much. And so many people are burned out. They have mental problems. I think we have low self-awareness at the moment. And people are, I think they're mentally lost. So now even more than in 2001, we need this kind of strategies. We need to keep focus, keep clarity in our minds. What advice can you give to people to start with if they have the feeling that, sometimes I think people have a book, they throw it in the air. I think Einstein said it once. You throw the book in the air, all the letters, they fall down somewhere, and then people say, I don't know how to read this. And that's their life. And then you have to structure it, like you said, and you wrote it down. But what would your advice be for these kind of people?
So you ask, how would people start? It's not hard, and it's very quick. People say, how long does it take to sort of try this out and to get value out of it? I say, well, how long do you think it would take for you to write down the 10 things that are on your mind right now? Right? And then how long do you think it would take for you to go through each one of those and say, well, what's the next thing I need to do if I'm going to do something about that? What's the next action? And then write those down and then see how you feel. So it would take you about 5 minutes to actually start to implement the basics of getting things done, and then see how it feels.
Write it down out of your head on paper.
Or you could do it digitally. But
but you have to see it.
Paper is a lot easier. Yeah. Most of my capture is low-tech paper. Yeah. I mean, I lived with this or something like this for 40 years.
Notebooks. And you write stuff down.
Yeah, write stuff down.
Yeah. You don't have to remember it.
That's
no
not
memory what the brain is meant.
It's all in here. I just need to make sure I then do something about this. Yeah. I need to write down my largest bank sums for my accountant in California, because they need to do that. So no, I didn't even remember I wrote it down, but I would, because these get torn off and thrown into my physical in basket. And then so I can throw this away, I need to then either take the action or I need to then park it in my organization system, which is digital.
Yeah. But you keep your head clear.
Keep my head clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you explain the difference between the brain and the mind?
No.
The brain is a physical part inside of our head.
Okay. Well,
and the mind is the mixed up part.
The unseen thing, but is very real. So how you think of what you think about, you can't see that in the brain. They're getting better and better at being able to see what kind of thing you're thinking about.
But could you say that the mind is the software and the brain is the hardware?
I guess. Yeah, that would make sense. And I think you're much more of an expert at that stuff than I am. So, master.
I'm trying to be. Yeah. But it's reprogramming your software to understand yourself better, to have more clarity of who you are and what you're doing. And I think in today's world, so many people have no idea who they really are deep down inside, because they're so busy, with the outside world. And so many people have no connection anymore with their internal self, their inner voice, their heart, nature, my opinion. And that's why we see the world we live in now, which is a total chaos, my opinion.
I'm not sure that's so different than it's been in the history of humankind.
No. You think it's always been like this?
At least to some degree. I think people, especially, I guess what's really different is, as Peter Drucker called it, is knowledge work. Mm-hmm. If all you're doing is cranking widgets and you have a job to crank widgets all day long and you show up and there's a big pile of uncranked widgets, it's pretty clear, you're not having to deal with a lot of confusion about what to be doing. You might not like cranking widgets, but that's a little easier life to get a hold of. And a lot of people find themselves just doing physical work. just being really physical and being, ordinary and doing ordinary things. At least you can. And so I guess what's different is that people now have to think to know what to do, as opposed to having the doing obvious to them.
Yeah.
So a lot of, what showed up in the corporate world, like Kanban and Scrum and Agile and all those things, are ways to organize very efficiently the external flow of work so that you have no waste, and it's very efficient in terms of how those things. So those are great. A lot of companies use those, but the people who really use those well are software engineers, and where you can actually structure what you're doing, but you don't. If you're trying to be a human resources head, it doesn't quite line up quite that easily, or even accounting, might pretty well easily, you might be able to see it that way too. But as soon as you have choices about what to do and trying to pre-plan all that you're going to do doesn't really work for knowledge workers, because so many things show up. There's so many surprises. There's so many things you have to then suddenly take in, integrate, then refocus and recalibrate where you put your focus.
Okay. But then you have to adjust.
Yeah, that's almost a 24/7 thing. It's happening all the time.
Yeah,
and just have children and try to lay them out in a Kanban board. It doesn't work.
No, it's not going to work.
Doesn't work that way.
Good advice. I will tell my wife. You've been working with a lot of corporate guys, doing all the lectures and the coaching. And you recently, last year, published Team, which is getting things done with others. What is the most common problem people have with other people?
The other people are not doing the getting things done process personally. Also, the mechanics of how people are trying to work with each other are different than individual productivity. So if you read the book Team, you'll see that it's actually the same principles of getting things done: capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. It's just that there's a different application and context where those things come to play if you're working with somebody else. And for instance, you could be a football team and have incredible football players, but if they don't know how to work together as a team, they lose. So learning how we need to engage with each other. See, Michael, you could be clear for yourself. I could be clear for myself. But if you and I are going to try to do something together, we've just increased exponentially the complexity that we're going to have to deal with. Is this yours? Is this mine? Who's going to do that? Yeah. And that's just two people, try to manage 100, or 50
or a country
or a country
or a world
or just a team of 10 people.
Yeah.
So we wrote the book more about the mechanics of how a team functions within the team itself. Because if that falls through the crack, it's very difficult to focus on the bigger stuff, the vision stuff, the charisma, the relationship stuff, the emotional stuff, as you mentioned. But the emotions can really show up in spades if the team doesn't know how to work together well and people are letting stuff fall through the cracks. Meetings are late starting. People are bringing digital equipment into the meeting that has nothing to do with what's going on in the meeting. They leave the meeting with no decision about what actions need to be taken and who's doing them. When that happens, and by the way, the lack of clarity of roles on the team, when the old saying, whenever two people are responsible for something, nobody is. Right? So who owns it? Who owns the team and the team's output and the team's purpose? And does everybody know what the team's purpose is? So all of these things that I've talked about in terms of just the model for getting things done apply for the team. It's just in a different context where you would apply them.
Yeah. So it's about ownership. It's about clarity again. It's about accountability. Do you think most people and teams make things too complex for themselves?
In their heads, they do. Yeah.
And that's where it's happening.
Yeah, because if, for instance, they leave the meeting, see, bad meetings create bad emails, which create more bad meetings, which create more, it's a downward spiral, with that. And so people then have bad feelings about that. Most people do not, statistics, at least the surveys, Gallup and other people that have done surveys, a vast majority of people don't feel engaged with their job, with their work, with their team. And so that's
Do you know the percentage? How many people? I read somewhere it's 87.
Something like that.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
87
It's a lot.
of 100 do not really like what they're doing.
Or they don't see the purpose of it necessarily. They don't feel that it's really that meaningful in the world. Mm-hmm. Again, I just interviewed Rick Brakeman, and he's got a whole lot about how disengaged people are, with what they're doing. So,
is this one of the main problems we have in today's world, that we are not engaged in what we do?
Yeah.
How can we change that?
Get engaged.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, implement getting things done, and you'll find the things that are more meaningful to you. They'll just show up. Mm-hmm. See, I have a lot of people tell me, "Gee, David, you were so smart. You coached me, and that really changed what I had no idea what they did." I did a lot of coaching and some consulting in aerospace back in the late 80s. And I'd be in the room with like top level research engineers and scientists about space and about, airplanes and satellites and things like that. And I would lead the discussion and just write down what they were doing. And they'd walk out and they'd say, "God, David, you're so smart." I didn't do any. I still had no idea what they did. So I'm not really a content guy. What I could do is ask you questions so you could be clear about the content that you're working on. Why are you doing that project?
Yeah, you ask questions.
Yeah, I just ask good questions.
Yeah,
and listen.
You listen. You ask questions, and that leads to more clarity.
Certainly.
And that's what we all should do ourselves.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. If you would lead the world or your country, U.S., you're a great coach, a teacher, as I said, a wise man. What do you think we need in this world today to make it a more meaningful, better, happy world, planet to live in?
Well, some humility doesn't hurt. Mm-hmm. You don't know everything. So admitting you don't know everything. And then if you don't know everything, who can help? And then being able to engage with other people. All the coolest stuff happens with ordinary people having some sort of a vision, but not trying to do it by themselves. And then knowing how to engage with other people, to bring people on board, to share the vision and have their own vision of what they're doing and see how it fits in with the bigger game. Mm-hmm. And I think when you do that, you get a great team. So I think, building a team, and I don't mean to be too political, but Obama did a fabulous job of doing that. And he just had humility and was willing to just take the next step and do the best he could and have a vision and bring in people and engage people who were smarter than him and better at a lot of the stuff that needed to get done.
Yeah. Is it a problem that there is lack of faith in our society at the moment?
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Which leads to a lot of polarity as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's difficult for people to compromise. That's where the polarity comes from. Yeah. But the Civil Rights Bill, which was a phenomenal piece of work, happened because Lyndon Johnson was a negotiator and a compromiser, and he knew how to close the door and get people to work together across the aisle to make some stuff happen. But that's a skill. That's something that's not necessarily easy to do. Even just personal relationships, being able to say, "Hey, how can we do this better?" Or, "I'm uncomfortable with the way that happened."
But that does need more self-awareness.
Sure.
So you have to look more at yourself than others.
Yeah. Well, the healthiest thing is to take ownership for all of it.
Yeah. Not be responsible.
Not blame your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You say, gee, let me share something with you. Here's how I'm feeling about this.
Yeah.
You don't have to, wipe things under the rug. You can be very open and very engaged with what it may be difficult or maybe enjoyable and say, wow, when you did that kind of thing, I really loved that. I really love it when you do this kinds of stuff. And, so again, it's ownership. And a lot of that, you don't have to necessarily be so self-aware other than just being able to take ownership for how you're feeling.
And to be honest.
What you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, honesty is...
Yeah, so you could use your principles, your methodology also in relationships.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. I'd like to go to education, the educational system. I don't know how it is in the States. I think we should change the system. I think the system will, it will break down anyway one day. If you could create a new educational system for new kids, what would it be like? What do you think is important to teach children or people?
Well, a lot of what we've been talking about, like being honest with where you are, how you feel, what you'd like, what's going on. And obviously the freedom to explore and to be a kid, for instance. I think Montessori did a really good job with building a structuring an environment that has the kids have a lot more freedom than a lot of other institutions. Some of the best education I've seen are people who homeschool their kids. Especially, I had a CTO, a guy in my company in California, and he's raised 5 girls, and he and his wife are major practitioners of GTD, and he started teaching his kids all those things, and he'd do it at home, and they're now, kind of taking over the world in terms of how their success that they've created now in their 20s. So, I think freedom, being inquisitive, being humble, and finding out, what about the kid? You could have 2 kids from the same parents, be very different personalities, very different interests and proclivities.
Yeah.
So,
when we started Masterminds Academy and when I started writing Master Your Mindset, I said in interviews, we teach you what you don't learn at school. It's about you, the mind, the power of thoughts, imagination. Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. About handling emotions. There's a lot of similarity between getting things done and master your mindset. I discovered later on. I wonder why schools do not teach more of this personal development, because especially in the States, like you said, before you, Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, there were so many people in coaching, in personal development. And in America, it's I think a lot of people are more in personal development than in Europe. Still here, it's a bit like, oh, no, that's not for me. I don't need that. But I really wonder why it's still not more integrated in the educational systems, in schools, in university. I don't know how it is in university, but GTD should be one of the, master plans in school, in my opinion.
One would think. But in order to teach it, you need to know it, and you need to do it, and you need to model it. And that's maybe the toughest part of it. By the way, there's there's an organization here that actually started in the UK called School of Life. That's exactly what they do. Yeah. It's all the life skills, essentially. And, they're great folks.
Yeah. You're not only an author and a great speaker, but you have the David Allen Corporate. It's a business. And you have a lot of coaches everywhere in the world spreading your message. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually you have a kind of your own school.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you still running the business?
Still running it. My wife is really more the CEO than I am, because she'd been for 35, 40 years since I've known her, she's been actually working with this material. She's trained a lot of our coaches too. And so yes, well, we're the owners, but we adopted 15 years ago, holacracy. So we have no job titles. We just have accountable roles. Mm-hmm. And so you could say for the outside world, yes, I'm an owner of the business, but I don't want to play the founder's card. And we shrank we were 50 people when we were still doing training and coaching in the U.S. because we hadn't really distributed the stuff outside of that. And then we found a fabulous partner in the U.S. that took on the training piece of it and another partner that took on the coaching part of it. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we gave that up and trusted them to be able to handle those things, I didn't need this kind of staff that I had back then. Mm-hmm. So we're now 5.
Lean and mean.
Lean and mean. Well, we became more of an IP licensing company than a training and coaching company, though we still did some of that. But a lot of what we've done is to build a process and an educational process about how to certify coaches and certify trainers and master trainers. Yeah. So that's a lot of what we've done over the last 15 years, really. Yeah. And so that's changed. But interestingly, when those 50 people, they began to realize why we were changing what we were doing and why we were shrinking, and they all supported it. Mm-hmm. So they all went on to do bigger and better things themselves after that. So so it's nice. And, we're still virtual, but, we've got two of those 5 live in the States in California, and one lives in Medellin, Colombia. And me and my wife, those are us 5.
Catherine and you live in Amsterdam since 11 years now already? About
2014.
Yeah, so we moved 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
You moved from California to Amsterdam. My question is why?
People often ask that, especially if they know we were in Santa Barbara.
We left Amsterdam in 2015. Yeah.
Well, several reasons. First of all, we don't have kids, so we're kind of free in that way. Our company was becoming more virtual anyway. We were in a little town called Ojai in California, just east of Santa Barbara. And people were we built a little jewel box office for our business, but people were starting to work from home anyway. And, it was becoming more of a virtual world. So pretty soon we sold that business, and we said, I think it's time to leave the States. My wife in particular, her parents were Scottish, and they had immigrated in the 1950s. Catherine was born in Philadelphia in the U.S., but she didn't feel any particular allegiance necessarily to America, to being an American. I grew up there and had all of my ancestors were all Americans from the 1700s. But I was traveling anyway. Back then, in my earlier days, I was on the road, 150, 200 days a year. So I was sort of traveling the world anyway, moving around. And we said, okay, where do we go? And it could have been anywhere as long as I was near a good airport. I was still doing keynote speeches, kind of.
You still do?
All over. Still, every once in a while now. Yeah. After the pandemic, they dropped off a bit, and I do virtual keynotes now mostly. But in any case, and we were, the States is so myopic in terms of its point of view. Most Americans don't even have passports. And they say, outside world? Oh, yeah, there is one out there somewhere. But,
they don't have passports?
Yeah. We were...
So that's why you cannot ask for a passport if they have to vote. They don't have one.
I don't know. I don't even read the news anymore, hardly. Anyway, so Catherine and I, we said, let's throw the dart. And we saw people slightly older than us looking a lot more sedentary than we wanted to be. And we were active and healthy. And we said, what the heck? And, my wife is 13 years younger than me. I'm 79, she's 65. But that was, 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, we were a little younger. So we said, let's just throw a dart. Where could we go as long as I'm near an airport, a good airport? And we said, God, it could be Milan, it could be Stockholm, it could be Copenhagen, it could be Berlin, it could be Kyoto. We're huge Japanophiles, so we love Japan and the Japanese thing, but that's just so far away from everything, anywhere. So we said, well, it's got to be Europe somewhere. And we'd been to Amsterdam once or twice anyway, so we love the city. It's an eye candy city, of course. And so we said, I was naive. I thought, let's spend 2 months there, and then let's spend 2 months in Milan, and then 2 months in Stockholm, or whatever. And who knew? As soon as you spend 3 months anywhere, and if you want to be legal, you have to jump through the hoops and get residency and do all that stuff. So we said, well, Amsterdam, and Amsterdam was about as far north as my wife feels comfortable being, in terms of dark. Because we talked to people about Copenhagen and Stockholm. They said they're lovely, especially in the summer, but winters are a little cold and a little dark. So Catherine said, I think Amsterdam is about as far north as we'd feel comfortable being. And we love the Dutch. We love the Dutch culture. We love the Dutch people. We love the Dutch style. We love the practicality of the Dutch and elegance, directness. So all those were positive qualities. So once we were here, we didn't know how long we'd stay, but we still kept falling more and more in love with, and I read Russell Shorto's History of Amsterdam, which is a fascinating book. As a matter of fact, I actually read it twice. When we realized we were going to move to Amsterdam, I read it in the States. And then once I got to Amsterdam and we got an apartment on Vetteringschans, I said, I got to read it again, because a lot of places that was reading about in the book are a stone's throw from where I'm living right now. So I wound up learning more about Amsterdam than a lot of Amsterdammers knew. Just because of going through some of the history, understanding the history. I read 2 or 3 other books of the history of Amsterdam. So we loved it. So.
And you still love to live there?
We still love to live. So now we bought an apartment, renovated it. It took a year to renovate it, and it's lovely. We were right in Boutenveld area, where we were right. Literally, we had joined the Geisbrecht from Amstel Park. Yeah. So we have 2 little Cavalier dogs. So all we have to do is go down a flight of stairs and out the door, and they have a park there. They're free to roam in, and so. We love that. We love the globality of it, Amsterdam in particular. Now, Amsterdam's kind of like San Francisco. There's the Republic of San Francisco and there's the Republic of Amsterdam. So, it kind of has its own, style and geist. But yeah, no, we love it and intend to stay. And we love our neighborhood. It's, we're in the 4th place. We moved. Because light supplying was a little noisy and a little messy of all the British, guys.
With all the British,
over,
especially the British.
All the Brits coming over on their bachelor parties, And so we said, okay, a little quieter, gentler would be nice. And once you learn the trams in Amsterdam, as long as you're along a good tram line, you can spread out. Yeah. So we went south. So then we moved to Apollolaan. Lovely place there. And then we were sharing a place with an institute there so it wasn't quite as private as we like. So then we moved even further south to Stadionkade, and which is right on the canal. Beautiful, gorgeous, the old buildings and whatever. But it was a little stiff in terms of the neighborhood there. It was all kind of, sort of wealthier Caucasian folks, and so where we are now, again in Boutenveld, it is great because there's lots of Japanese people, lots of Jewish people, lots of actually in our apartment complex. There's probably I don't know how many nationalities that are there, but probably 15 or 20 anyway.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. So and we like that.
Yeah. What makes you happy?
I have to say, happiness is a highly overrated emotion, because as happy as you are, that's how depressed you can get too. Mm-hmm. I like to use satisfaction or fulfillment or whatever, because a satisfied person is not necessarily grinning and smiling all the time. Mm-hmm. They're feeling good about what they're doing.
Yes.
So I feel the best when I'm doing stuff and doing the right things that I need to be doing, given my values and given what's important.
Yeah.
So
Well, what gives meaning to your life at the moment?
Doing what needs to be done.
And what needs to be done?
Sometimes take a nap, sometimes have a glass of wine, sometimes walk the dogs, sometimes deal with a tough email that I got to respond to. So it depends on what it is. I guess maybe because I'm kind of old and cranky now, my priority is, what do I feel like doing? Because if you have the courage to actually do what you just do what you feel like doing, what you feel like doing will change. Mm-hmm. If you feel like taking a nap or not doing anything or doing nothing, you can do that for a while, and at a certain point, you'll feel like doing something. So, I'm more, maybe you could say, more of a Zen kind of, whatever I'm doing, I kind of get behind it, whether I'm washing dishes and walking the dog or, dealing with the bank accounts and taxes, and all that stuff.
But you're really enjoying life.
Yeah. No, it's fulfilling. It is.
Well, that's important.
It is.
Yeah. Do you still travel a lot?
Not too much. I'm going to Sofia, Bulgaria, and going to Orlando, Florida, and traveling more around the Netherlands. Actually, mm-hmm. I've done a lot of pro bono work for the several universities around the country, and going to Copenhagen too. I have some partners up there that are having a special summer event. Yeah.
You do the things you like.
Travel is not something I used to really like it a lot, because I like going to different places that I hadn't seen before. And, and change, I like good food and drink, and that changes depending on where you are. And I used to be very much okay with that. Now, especially since the pandemic and since 9/11, travel just got started to be a little weirder, security and all of that, and so I'm not that enthralled about travel anymore. I'm very happy just kind of being here and exploring the Netherlands. There's still a whole lot I haven't seen. I finally bought a car a year ago because we were able to then buy a garage that was right under our apartment, which is nice. Didn't have to bother with parking. And, in Amsterdam, you don't really need a car. It was everything, using Uber or the trams or the trains. And, it's just so efficient, and well run in a way. Yeah. I mean, the Dutch always complain about it, but the Dutch complain about everything. So.
The Dutch complain about everything. You mentioned you like the directness of Dutch people. And I noticed, because Wiley published my book, I have the PR company, I have the publishing company, and I have these calls every week. And sometimes I see the eyes like, what is he? Is he really saying this? I was like, I'm just honest, I don't like the cover. It's ugly. And they were like, oh, you don't really like it? No, it's ugly. We were not going to do this. And then I talked to one of the guys of my team, and he said, I think you are too direct for the American people. And I was like, but I'm just me, I don't want to be rude, but it's better to be clear, to have misunderstandings about what I mean.
Yeah.
Why is there such a difference between American and Dutch people? I have no idea. But is it true? Are we so direct?
Yes. Yeah, relatively speaking. In America, they like being polite. They like being nice. They like being, and the Dutch do too, but you're direct but still elegant about your directness. Kind of make a joke about it, but it is somewhat true. I say, well, let's have lunch. You go, why? That's not like I don't want to have lunch. It's like, well, so what's the purpose? What would be the purpose of a lunch? And if I said, hey, I just like to get to know you a little bit better, they go, cool, let's do it. So, it's that kind of directness as opposed to, oh, yeah, and then they never do it. So people have always been surprised that we actually do what we say, that we're kind of direct. Catherine loves it. She says, I've never been called a bitch in the Netherlands. So, not that she's really that bitchy, but, she's pretty much was known even over there to being, fairly direct.
Yeah.
And so people would get uncomfortable with that even in the U.S. Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly why that is, though, because you had to get so much stuff done being a small country. And I don't know. Somebody wrote a book, I think I read, about why the Dutch, what's unique about being Dutch. I can't remember what he said, but he said that, that was one of the aspects of the culture.
Yeah.
Was essentially its directness.
Yeah. You published Getting Things Done in 2001.
First edition.
The first edition. Was it just before or after 9/11?
Same year.
Yeah, it was same year. Yeah. If you would publish it now in today's world, would it be different? Because there are so many books out there at the moment. We're publishing my book now in the States this week. I was at Barnes & Noble 2 months ago, and I was like, holy crap, there are so many books about meditation. It's like there's a whole store about meditation, personal development, leadership. And then you buy a book and you get this back with just another book or so many books. And I was like, that's true. There are already so many books. Why should one write another book? Everything is already written. Would it have been different if you'd published Getting Things Done in 2025?
I don't think so. The methodology doesn't change.
It's the same.
It's the same.
And it still works.
And, the 2015, I didn't write it to make it a new book. What I did was I wrote it and updated a little bit of my languaging, and also the audience that was going to be attracted to it was much larger than in 2001. 2001, we positioned the book for the fast-track professional, because they were the people hungriest for it and were willing to, interested in that kind of information. So I'm in suit and tie on the cover, and anyway, so the biggest difference is the audience, the size of the audience, because I knew even when I wrote the first edition that it worked for the clergy, it worked for stay-at-home dads, it worked for anybody who had a busy life that wanted to get more on top of it. But again, we positioned it more for that audience. But by 2015, the audience, well, let's say in 2001, maybe 5% in a company of people really, needed it and needed, because as you graduate, your life doesn't become easier. People think, oh, I'm going to get promoted. Oh, good luck. So, but by 2015, 90% of the people in companies needed it because of the tsunami of email, corporate change, all those things were going on. And the audience, a lot of people outside even the corporate world had busier and busier lives, were having to deal with, a lot more things just in their personal life. So the audience just was different. So I wrote it with more, not so much business jargon or whatever. We tried to make both those books as evergreen as possible. So you can still pick up even the first edition and still be very real, for anybody to read it now. It's just the 2015 version is even more so, more informal, more comfortable. I rewrote the whole book again, to get the second edition done. And just to see, would I still say what I said the way I said it? And a lot of it, yes. But there were other things that I wanted to add to it, or there were other things that sort of, I tweaked it, as I wrote it.
And it's still as good as it was before. I read the 2015 version, yeah. It changed the life of our CEO, Mike.
Yeah. Why
we have this successful Meditation Moments company now.
Yeah.
I'm very happy I read it as well, because it always adds something to your own wisdom if you apply it in your own life. one final question, and maybe it's hard to answer, but actually, I'm a new writer in the US. No one knows me over there. What should be your advice for someone like me if you want to spread out a message in the US and sell books over there?
All I can say is what I did, because when I had some people telling me, David, you ought to write the book. That was, again, 20 years after I'd been doing all this work. And I said, write a book? How do you write a book? My first thing to do was to buy 3 books about how you write a book.
Very good.
And also I had a good friend who was a senior guy at Houghton Mifflin in Boston, publishing company. And so he became a good friend. And so I was talking to him about this. He said, well, David, listen, if what you're going to write is very specific, then you could go right to the company that publishes those kinds of books. If you were writing the sex life of retired penguins, there's probably only one company that would even consider doing that. So you might as well just send whatever you're doing to them, see if they get it. I said, but if your book might have more of a universal appeal, he said, and you don't have a good name or a name that people know, said you need an agent. You just need a good agent. She's still there after all these years. Very much worth her 15%, and because she was an ex-editor in New York City. She lives in Boston, the Boston area now. So she knew the business and she knew a lot of people there, and that helped.
I need her number.
Happy to say. She's semi-retired now, so I don't think she's taking any clients.
No. She doesn't have to retire.
Yeah.
Yeah. An agent, very important. Yeah.
It was for me.
Yeah.
It was for me. And even with a good
it's
agent.
again the team. You cannot do it by yourself. You need good quality people around you.
Yeah, but I wrote it all myself. It's funny, the agent, because I wrote a book proposal, which is like a business plan for a book.
Yeah.
That was one of the toughest things to do. Yeah. It's like, who's your audience? What's unique?
Well, that's so hard.
It's very difficult to go through. But I did that and then write a sample chapter or whatever. And she read it and looked at it. She said, David, who wrote this? I said, what do you mean who wrote this? She said, this is really good, but most business books are done by ghostwriters.
That's true.
And I said, no, I wrote it. I know how to write. My mom was an English teacher. So, she said, wow, well, good for you. So, no, I did it all by myself. I did, I don't know if you need to know this, but I did the first draft and it didn't work. Because my first draft, I wrote like I gave a seminar. But that's a very different context. And people would start reading the book and they go, God, David, I got it with your first paragraph, but it took 4 chapters to find out how to do it. So I had this kind of dark night of the soul, and I literally just threw away the first draft. It took a year to do it, and I just threw it away. I said, okay, I need to start this again. And my big aha was that there were 3 things I wanted people to get. First of all, I wanted to get them to understand just what the model was itself. Secondly, I wanted them to get the how-tos if they wanted to implement the model. And then thirdly, I wanted to do by the way, if you do this, watch what may happen. And so I had feathered all that kind of together in the first draft. So what I did and you see the book, they're in 3 parts. So the first part is here's the model. Second part is if you want to implement it, here's how you do that. And the third part is by the way, the power of what this is, the power of the pieces of being implemented. Here's what some of the results you could expect. Yeah. So I did that, and that worked for me anyway. But that was agonizing, And the biggest mistake I made was thinking that I could have breakfast with a client, in New York or Boston or somewhere, and then do an all-day seminar, stand-up all-day seminar, have drinks with the client or dinner with the client afterwards, and then get on a plane and expect that then I could write, another chapter. Who are you kidding? It took me quite a while to learn that I needed at least 4 hours of clear space. Otherwise, I'd step on my own toes and write stuff that I had already written or whatever. And it took me a while to learn to get it. How do I get in my flow of writing? So that was agonizing.
So you became a writer.
Yeah.
And before that, you was the Karate Kid, black belt. You've been a waiter, a sailor.
Yeah.
What have you not done so far, which you still like doing?
Oh, that's a good question. What have I not done so far that I would like doing? Michael, I can't think of anything, actually. My life is so fulfilling now and satisfying that I suppose, there are a few places that I'd like to travel that I haven't been to yet. Iceland and New Zealand and, a few things like that kind of that have been on my someday maybe list. But other than that, I'm fine. Just live out my life, be healthy, and make sure that I'm comfortable, and, I'll be 80 soon. So staying as comfortable as I can be, because I keep doing this work. I can't stop getting things done. I'm still coaching, people informally or mostly informally, but I have several people that, want me to call them regularly and keep them on track, or to listen to them and, do some consulting about it. And I couldn't stop doing any of that.
And you still like doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop. So it's, again, a very fulfilling thing, because, again, anybody who implements any of this stuff that I'm talking about is going to improve their condition.
Yeah. So if you have the feeling that you have too much stress, too little time, too many things to do, read the book, Getting Things Done. And listen to all your lectures, the TED Talks on YouTube. They're great. I really love them. Where did you learn to be a speaker like that?
Well, I was a child actor in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I grew up. My mother had seen me. I memorized things at a 5-year-old level, and I'd walk in and entertain everybody by reciting Bugs Bunny or something like that. So when I was 11, she decided to give me acting lessons as a birthday present. So I wound up taking acting lessons, and she said I'd probably be pretty good at it. And it turned out I got, the best child's role in several plays, musicals, and other things in Shreveport. They had some very good community theaters. And so I just wound up being, for about 2 or 3 years, a really good child actor. And then kind of outgrew that in a way. And then in high school, I debated, and I became a state champion debater. And so, learning to debate extemporaneously.
Yeah. Rehearse and practice. Do it. Yeah. Get your things done. Yeah. And you did.
I did, but it wasn't like there was some grand plan. It was just the next thing that kind of showed up, and decided to take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's remarkable, because I always say you have to know where you're going. You have to set your goal. I really think I had a roadmap for my life up till I was 40, 42 when I started doing what I'm doing now. But your life just happened.
It just happened.
It just happened, and you're blessed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Great to have you here.
Thanks. Great. Enjoyed the conversation, Mike.
Thank you so much.
You're good at it. Yeah.
Mr. David Allen, thank you.